Which is my breezy,
well,
seamless segue to Adam's piece.
Yeah. So on Saturday, there were over 600 rallies around the globe to march for science. The march was to raise awareness around the need for science to be more readily available and communicated freely, without any fear of having retribution or being misrepresented. But it's also to boost awareness around the need for science as a part of a well-functioning democracy. One of the most common reasons why markets and political systems often fail to provide optimum outcomes is misinformation and decision-making. What's worse is that it seems that misinformation is increasingly growing around our society. Alternative facts or dodgy health supplements, anyone? We've all seen the ads, we've all heard the blah, 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 and we need science now more than ever to try and distinguish fact from fiction. We need to have a more well-informed, critically thinking public. Science is not a religion. It culminates from the continual testing of hypotheses. It's not perfect, it doesn't have all the answers, and views often change. But it's far better than blind faith or randomly generated answers. Science, it learns from the past, it has humility, and it aims to inform based on the best available evidence at the time, with universities being the scientific powerhouses that are the critics and consciences of our society. Unfortunately, research is gradually transitioning from being a public good to simply being another toolbox in the spin doctor's toolbox. Policy is often based on cherry-picked rather than complete and honest science, and universities are being turned into businesses as a part of a get-rich-quick scheme. Academics are increasingly reliant on commercial funding, which not only risks their academic integrity, but it also transfers science from being a public benefit to one of a private good or a private benefit. 40% of scientists are now in fear of publicly communicating results that are controversial and fear that their funding might be cut, with many also gagged by their employment contracts to protect the company image in which they work for. And the little government funding that is available is often targeted towards advancing political ventures rather than being invested for the sake of scientific purposes. But enough of the dreariness, and on to the solutions. I would like to see a government that, 1, invest in science, but both theoretical and applied scientific ventures. One that simply invests in science for the sake of developing knowledge. We don't know what we don't know. Penicillin, the microwave, the Big Bang, Coca-Cola, and even Viagra are all important discoveries that have come about purely by accident through the discovery of knowledge. They weren't set out with the purpose of trying to, whatever their purpose was, rot our guts. Number 2, we need to be able to revoke the ability of employers to ban or punish scientists who speak out openly and honestly about their scientific findings. 3, we need to be able to direct universities to once again be a place of open debate, knowledge, development, and being back to being the critics and consciences of society. Universities should not be run solely for the purpose of economic development or just as another business. 4, we need to change copyright laws to ensure that all New Zealand research, especially that from government institutions and New Zealand universities, is freely available. And 5, we need to invest in a media portal to communicate New Zealand's research with our public. That way we have a more informed and critically thinking public. And finally, we need a government that will practice frank, open, honest, and independently peer-reviewed, evidence-based decision-making, not simply degrading scientific integrity by cherry-picking policy to suit their political ventures.
Cool, thanks Adam. Before we get into this, Round of applause for Adam. Before we get into the discussion, I want to do a huge shout out to Erin Wilson, who works at Massey University and organised the March for Science here in Palmerston North. We were the first March for Science in the whole world. So there were 600 marches around the world. Yeah. And I think they're actually still ongoing. And we were the very, very first here in Palmerston North. We had about 240 people come along, which is not bad for a town with 85,000
Pretty good
people in
turnout,
it.
yeah.
So, but I think it tells you a lot about how important science is to us here in Palmerston North. I want to pick up on your point about allowing research to be more free thinking, especially in publicly funded research, but I think also in privately funded research as well. There is a huge demand on scientists to come up with the answer that they have been told to find, that they're being funded to find. And you're right, serendipity has played such an important part in so many of the real discoveries that have really advanced science and technology and advanced our society as well. And if we put straitjackets on our scientists and say, no, you can only discover these things and you're not allowed to go off into more blue sky stuff, it actually it restricts our ability to make genuinely interesting and often commercially valuable discoveries. And, we are giving up on a lot of potential economic growth by being so restrictive and restrained on what our expectations are for science.
That's right. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. You've met Mike Joy, haven't you?
I've met Mike Joy. I was going to bring Mike Joy up. I was going to segue nicely here and say I'm quite good at talking about academic freedom and the critical conscience of society. And it's really interesting that you talk about universities going back to this, because a study was released at the end of March that showed that academics who work in our New Zealand institutions have found that their academic freedom and their freedom to express and share their research has degraded significantly over the last 10 years. I won't give you a stat because I can't remember what the statistic is off the top of my head, but it's really important that we do have academics that are still pushing that, still using their academic freedom and still fighting for the academic freedom. And I was going to say Mike Joy is your classic example of an academic who speaks of his research in a well-informed way and is often viewed as an extremist or I think someone has used the word traitor before. So
Eco-terrorist.
They're eco-terrorist. Oh gosh. So I think that there is room for us to improve on scientists, and especially scientists working in our university institutions, to continue to push their academic freedom. It's in the Education Act. It's there. They should speak out.
Yeah, I mean, there's no problem with people debating and people disagreeing with someone like Mike, who is he's trying to use his research and the facts as he sees them to inspire some debate and have some serious conversation about, in his particular field, freshwater management. But in any field where political decisions have to be made, that should be informed by from a scientific basis and with as much fact as we can. And yet I often see the people who argue with Mike and people like him arguing from almost a completely fact-free basis, but disagreeing with him simply because he's challenging the status quo or challenging the way they are making money at the moment, and use the most outrageous terms sometimes, and support this idea and foster this idea that we shouldn't listen to the experts anymore, that we shouldn't listen to academics, that we shouldn't listen to people who do research, and this is let's use the word Trump. This is the approach that he's really been pushing, that that we don't need to listen to the experts anymore. What do the experts know? Everybody else knows better, and it's a scary prospect actually that we would stop listening to scientists and stop listening to the experts.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that if you look at Crown Research Institutes like NIWA and Cawthron, a lot of the scientists that work for them are also gagged by their employment contracts when they can't speak out about a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're Crown Research Institutes. We are funding them through our taxpayer dollars. We're paying for this research that they're only told to be gagged about. What are we getting?
Indeed.
It's a public good. We should all be getting it.
That's right. No, I absolutely agree with you. Heather, you work around the university. I mean, is there anything structural, or is there anything that you can put your finger on that's reducing academic freedom, or at least curtailing it?
I mean, there are the attacks on academics who speak out quite freely that obviously make people feel uncomfortable. But I think we also have to look at kind of the structure. I mean, the funding system for universities and our institutions isn't that fantastic, hasn't been fantastic for quite a number of years. But PBRF, so the Performance-Based Research Fund, is a way that academics are kind of measured for their research, etc. And I think it's probably time, it's been in place for a while, it's probably time that has a visit to see if that is actually improving the research outcomes of our public institutions.
Yeah, I think that's fair actually, that the thinking behind Performance-Based Research Fund was to encourage research activity and high quality research activity. But like any system, after a number of years, and it must be a good 15 years, do you reckon, since that first came in? I think it is
maybe not that long.
well worth reviewing that and making sure that it is working as best as it can. Research and development is something which is really important to our economy in New Zealand. We are an agricultural based economy. If we're going to add value to our primary products, we have to engage in agricultural science and support and fund research and development in New Zealand. If you look at where we sit on the OECD table, we're pretty average. We could do a lot better given how important exports are to us in New Zealand. Do you think that's something that we should be spending more money spending more public money on research and development? And how can we kind of encourage the private sector to get more engaged in research and development as well?
You're looking at me. So
I'm looking at both of you.
I'm assuming that you want an answer from me, but I feel like Adam might have a better answer than me. I think you're right in that it does appear that we're putting all of our kind of eggs into the agriculture basket. And we could kind of sprinkle our eggs around a bit.
Well, rather than sprinkling the eggs around, I would say, why don't we increase the size of the pie?
Yeah.
We can still invest in agriculture in the same way we do, because agriculture is not going anywhere. But at the same time, we can increase the pie and have that extra dot, I guess, divvied out amongst other institutions.
Well, actually, I mean, that's exactly what we need to do with our economy, and a good place to start would be with the research that we're doing. Absolutely. We actually need to grow the size of our economy and diversify our economy. It's not about stepping away from agriculture. It's about saying we do agriculture really, really well. Let's continue doing that well, and let's diversify into some other industries additionally. And certainly, we need good science, good research to underpin that, to make sure that it's we're diversifying into areas which are high technology, which are high skilled, that support good jobs and actually grow the economy. So absolutely.
And even if we
does that mean more money for R&D, do you think?
I definitely think so. And even if we are wanting to invest in agriculture, all of the funding doesn't have to go straight into agriculture. We can make more money off agriculture if we instead of shipping our milk off overseas as dry milk powder, we can invest in ways to add value to the agricultural products that we have. So investing in science in general.
What about greening the way we do agriculture?
Oh, we definitely need to be able to do that, especially when you've got around about 90% of nitrogen loads in rivers all coming from agriculture, then we have an issue.
Very good, very good. We've got some scientists in the room. Anybody, don't feel gagged. Don't feel gagged. This is you're more than welcome to leap up to the microphone and join in if there's anything else you want to add. Is there anything else you guys want to add on science and the importance of evidence-based policy making? I mean, I don't think any politician is pure as the driven snow on this one. I think we all would like to do our best to make our policy based on evidence. I would like to imagine that those of us on the left side of politics are better than this at those on the right side of politics, but I think it is important that we do our best to make our policy based on evidence, and we have people who have approached the microphone. So, over to you.
Sort of a comment and question about the scientific evidence-based policy and the mental health that was mentioned before, and how these things kind of tie together with that question earlier about drug use and things like that. I mean, for instance, there's a lot of scientific studies showing really good efficacies of certain drugs, which in New Zealand are completely illegal. And a lot of people, because of our mental health system, are getting no help from the places they should be. So you get people turning to other things for self-medication and that sort of thing. And then, of course, they're being criminalised. And so all of these things kind of tie together and, need to be part of complete policies.
Absolutely.
Have holistic thinking in government.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of those areas where it's really important to follow the science as much as we can, and not just follow our emotions. One of the things that has always perplexed me is that we have medicinal opiates, which are, that's medicinal heroin, essentially, if you want to be a little bit perverse about this, and yet we still don't have decent access to medicinal cannabis, despite the fact that, regardless of your views on recreational cannabis use, there is a lot of science that supports medicinal use of cannabis for a range of ailments. Guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I absolutely agree. And I just wanted to touch on one more point that Heather raised about the PBRF. We often rank scientists based on how many publications they put out and what level journals they go to. But the average Joe blog doesn't read those journals, and actually most of the time they cost a lot of money to read too. What scientists don't get credit for is whenever they do speak out to the public. They're told that it's a part of their job description too, but for every article that Mike Joy puts into the Dominion Post or New Zealand Herald, he doesn't get credit for that, whereas other scientists will get credit if they are publishing in scientific journals that are not read by the public. So I'm not saying that we don't need to be publishing in scientific journals. We absolutely should be, because we need that peer review process. But we also need to be able to reward scientists for ones that speak out and are putting their articles towards in newspapers and getting into the news, because at the moment that's unrecognised work.
I'm going to leap in here because that's sort of what I was wanting to comment on. I'm a librarian out at Massey, and one of the things that's coming up in scholarly communication is, of course, the idea of the fact that a lot of this information that scientists and other academics are generating is behind paywalls, because they're only available to people who subscribe to a particular journal. And you mentioned earlier, Adam, about changing laws so that research would be available to the public. And I know that I think in the US and the UK there have been moves to say that if you're receiving public money for your research, you need to make it publicly available in some kind of open access source. So presumably that's something you'd...
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
that? So actually a few weeks ago I got a paper accepted in a scientific journal, and one of the things that it asked me was, what country am I from? And the reason why I wanted to know that was because in certain countries, such as Australia, and I think Canada is the case as well, they have copyright laws that if you are publishing from a university or a Crown Research Institute, that the government holds the copyright laws for that article.
Okay.
So even if you publish it and it's not open access, because the government holds the copyright laws, the government can make that article openly available. So perhaps that is something that we could easily do here to be able to make our research more freely available.
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. No, I'm just breaking into Adam's wallet here, because there we go.